All right, that's credits. We did it. Oh, God. All right. So first things first. The bottom center of the screen says that we have beaten 23 games in 2024 and 470 since we started doing this in 2020. Those numbers need to be updated. We've now beaten 24 games in 2024 and 471 since we started doing this. Oh, gosh. All right. So let's start. I'm going to turn this music down a little bit because it is blaring. Yeah. So here's the deal. So let's start with this. This is one of the best games I've ever played. It is one of the best video games I've ever played of any kind. And this is not a genre that I generally gravitate towards. But it is one of the best games that I've ever played. So let's talk about why. Part of it is not its own merits. I have to be honest. Part of the reason this game is so enjoyable is because it is piggybacking off of a story that is laced with nostalgia, and that's not. I never even really played the game back when I was a kid, except for maybe a few minutes here and there. But I watched multiple people play all the way through this game. And so I'm familiar with the story. I'm familiar with the characters. And it was a very formative time in my life. 1997. I was 13 when this game came out, I think. Maybe 14. And so if you give me a world to live in, this way, where it's this huge, sprawling open world with all of these awesome things to do, and it looks gorgeous, and the combat is like amazing, and it's very well polished, and you did everything right, pretty much, most things right, then yeah, like, that's pretty hard to top. It actually reminds me, as far as enjoyment level, it reminds me a lot of the Resident Evil 4 remake, because that was a game that was magical to me, and Capcom managed to recreate the magic. It was like I was playing it for the first time. That's kind of how I feel about this game. It has recreated that magic and then added so much awesome stuff to it that, like, the fact that it took me 2 weeks to beat this game. That's the longest I've spent on a game since Elden Ring, probably. And I didn't spend that much longer on Elden Ring. And I enjoyed it, almost every minute of it. We'll talk about some of the downsides here in just a second, but it's hard to put a price on the level of enjoyment that I got from this game. I mean, they were talking about Skull and Bones was the first quadruple A game. No. This is probably the first quadruple A game, and if that's even a thing, which it isn't, by the way. The Final Fantasy Remake was great, and it laid a great foundation, but this takes it so far beyond Final Fantasy Remake. Final Fantasy Remake was a very, very good game. I think it's somewhere in my top 30 or 35 all time. This is a top 10 game all time, because the open world aspects were so well done. They're not cookie cutter. They're very engaging and fun. It's the perfect amount of fan service. Great callbacks to all these different parts of Final Fantasy VII lore. They did the way that they've decided to, and I'm not spoiling anything. I'm not going to spoil anything, but the way that they've decided to, like, take that original narrative and make this, like, meta commentary on it is genius. It's really, really cool. Just if you're talking about the bare bones of the game, like, the combat is excellent. The story is, like, maybe the best, like, one of the best stories of it. It's one of the best stories of all time, in anything, honestly. The boss fights are kind of hit or miss, but there were some high points that were so good that they were incredible. All the RPG elements and the upgrades and all that stuff are just god tier. So, like, as far as all the foundational points, they've hit them all. Technically, the game is a marvel. The way it looks, sounds, plays, the controls, all that stuff is just on point. So even as someone that doesn't really get into JRPGs that much, I have to recognize that this is an astounding achievement, this remake. You know, I'll put something over this. Let's talk about the negatives. There aren't many, but there are a couple. Let's talk about, this one's kind of nitpicky, but it was prevalent multiple times. There's something wrong with the sound mixing in this game. It's very, very common for the music to be so loud that you can barely hear the characters talking, even though there's a scene where the character's in the middle of an important conversation. The music is so loud that you can't hear them. I don't know, it seems like an easy fix, but the sound mixing in this game is real bad at sometimes. It's almost like it's just bugged. So that's one problem. Headphones just died. That's one problem. Another problem, the performance mode in this game. I hear they're trying to patch it, but it doesn't look like they've patched it yet. The performance mode does get you up to 60 frames per second, and there's not a lot of stutter in the frame rate. That's all good. But the actual resolution, when you put it to performance mode, is a significant drop. I eventually got used to it, but it took me an hour or two to get used to the fact to forget that I thought it looked like hell. You know what? Why am I doing this? So those are nitpicks, right? There is a story problem, I think. And I don't think it's just me. I think it's an objectively bad thing that these games do sometimes. I guess that's a Japan thing. Because I've heard this same problem with Kingdom Hearts, and I've experienced this in some other JRPGs. Some of these Japanese RPGs, they love making the story so complicated that it's impossible to make sense of it. And the Final Fantasy VII was one of the things that was really awesome about it, was that it was so accessible to Western audiences when it came out, because it really wasn't like that. And this game makes it more like that. The story, especially toward the end, gets so complicated that I honestly didn't know what I was watching. In some of what appeared to be the most important cutscenes in the game. And so it gets so convoluted and complicated, and they don't really explain it. You have to supplement with some kind of online material in order to understand what's going on. I really honestly don't know. Without spoiling anything, the most important question I had going into this game, I do not know the answer. Because it's just fucking ambiguous. And it's like, you know, when like 2/3 of the cutscenes in the final hour of the game are like fever dream, nightmare, or weird illusory nonsense, then it's kind of hard to feel emotionally attached and invested. I honestly don't know what happened at the end of the game. I don't know. So that's... I guess maybe there are people that like that, but I think it goes beyond a preference thing. I think that, in my opinion, that's objectively bad storytelling. Unless you're trying to do something where it's all about the imagery, like a Mulholland Drive kind of a thing, or like a David Lynch film or something, but that's not what this is. This is trying to tell a deep, compelling, cohesive story, and it's just not doing it because it doesn't make any sense. And one last complaint. This game was mostly pretty easy, which is not a complaint. I think I was fine with the level of difficulty for the kind of game that it was, except there were 2 or 3 bosses, particularly close to the end, that were what I call hard for the wrong reasons. It wasn't because they were difficult to master, it was because they had some bullshit move that would one-shot you if you didn't meet certain parameters by a certain point in the fight that were not explained to you. And the only way that I was able to figure that out was to look it up. I had to look it up and be like, why am I getting completely devastated with a damage that does 10,000 damage, way more than my health bar ever will be? It's not like I'm under-leveled. Like, I'm getting one-shotted, my whole party's getting one-shotted. And you look it up and it's like, oh, well, you have to take out this one, you have to focus on this one part of the body or this happened multiple times, or you have to stop attacking until this happens. And then, it's one thing if I were to look at it and be like, oh, I see how the game is trying to tell me that now. But no, the game never even made, and there was no implication that was ever a thing. You just had to figure it out on your own. And it doesn't make for good boss fights, in my opinion, to just get wiped out like that. And we're talking like 30-minute fights sometimes. And then you get wiped out and you have to start all the way over. And you don't know why you don't know why you died. That's the problem that I have with, that's my number one problem with bad boss fights. I'm not saying any of the boss fights in this game were quote unquote bad. I'm just saying that this was a problem with some of them. And it's a bad problem where if you get wiped out and it's not evident, it's not that you don't know because you're not just paying attention. It's like it's not evident why your whole party just got wiped out 4 times in a row. And you've been on fighting this fight for 2 hours. And you can't figure it out without looking it up. And no reasonable person could figure it out without looking it out. Why you keep getting, your party keeps getting wiped. To me, that's not good. That's inflated difficulty. It's lazy. It's not compelling way to make a boss fight. There's for the most part, Dark Souls, even the toughest Dark Souls bosses don't do that. When I die, I know why I died. I messed up. I need to get better at parrying, or I gotta block this certain move, or I have to dodge left instead of right, or whatever. You get it, right? If you're paying attention, you can see. And there were, not a lot, but a few critical times, where the bosses would just fucking party wipe you if you get to a certain point in the fight, because you didn't do some arbitrary thing that doesn't really make sense. So I didn't like that. That's pretty much it for the negatives. That's the main things. The story I thought was too ambiguous, especially toward the end. And some of the bosses were cheap. I love a tough boss. I love a tough boss fight, as long as it's fair and it makes sense. Some of the boss fights here, most of the bosses were either way too not difficult at all. Even surprisingly so sometimes. Like toward the end, I would just mop the floor with a boss. Even though I was under-leveled a little bit. And then, the story just being kind of fucking a dream state at the end. I didn't understand it. Those are my main complaints. And then, a couple of technical things. But on the whole, this game is a tour de force. The way that it handles all of the story elements from the original and expounds on them is masterful. It is. It's a top 10 all-time game for me, which is absolute beyond god tier territory. I think I haven't ranked it yet, but I'll think about it. But yeah, it was an incredible experience. I particularly enjoyed, especially toward the beginning, all the open world. Oh, and the mini games. Final Fantasy has the best mini games in gaming, man. If this game were just the card game, it would have been top 50 probably. If this game were just the card game that's in this game, Queen's Blood, that it might have made the top 50 because I enjoyed the card game so much. But I did every match in it. So yeah, that was great too. All right, I'll shut up. But it was a great time. I really, really enjoyed it. I'm excited to see the next game in 4 years on the PS6 or whatever it ends up being. I will be playing that at launch. Okay, let's turn this down. Okay, so I think I don't need to watch this. I'm gonna blur it out of the. I'm gonna blur it out of the end anyway. All right, last order of business. Final Fantasy Rebirth. It's been fun, but we are now going to delete you from our console and never play you again. Goodbye. Thank you. Thank you for existing. I love you.